Adventure Time's 7th season was fantastic, and I already made a video about my 5 favorite episodes. Now on the flip side, there were some episodes this season that didn't appeal to me that much. I'm gonna discuss the 5 episodes that I would consider the worst. I probably shouldn't have to say this, but if I didn't like an episode you enjoyed, it's not that big of a deal. At the end of the day, it's preference, it's personal taste. Now with that out of the way, let's bash the hell out of this show. I'm kidding. This season didn't even have any episodes that I hated, just those I didn't care for. Now, let's get criticizing. I feel somewhat bad displaying the title card for President Porpoise is missing because, wow, just look at how awesome it is. Unfortunately, despite the splendid title card, the episode was okay at best. The main story was extremely weak. It was much more fun to see Finn and Jake screw around than it was to see the story progress, and the resolution being that the octopus forgot there was a 3-day weekend was massively underwhelming. It feels like a conclusion lesser cartoons rely on. Such a bland move feels beneath Adventure Time. The real story of the episode is of course Banana Man's. He's very much the central character. His failure to connect with others and get them to notice him was a somber and well-handled aspect and deserves praise. With just a few lines of dialogue, Banana Man's feelings as an outsider were established, and there's nice nods to social anxiety. Yet the romance component of his story was handled terribly. It blooms from literally nothing. Hell, the following exchange of dialogue made me think Sybil the fish would end up having nefarious motives or something.
Come on, who cares?
But he's your president.
National politics don't really represent my interests.
But nope, they just keep abruptly hanging out together at the end. And despite Weird Al Yankovic being Banana Man's voice actor, the song just didn't do it for me. Ice King and BMO hanging out together and having imagination adventures though? That was so adorable and cute. Honestly, I would rather have had an entire episode about that. This choice might cause some backlash. 5 Short Tables just wasn't that enjoyable to me overall. Easily my least favorite out of all the Fiona and Cake episodes. That being said, 2 out of the 5 tables in the episode had great components. Butterscotch Butler obliterating Prince Gumball by knowing about his psyche was fan-freaking-tastic! The segment also details a myriad of characteristics about Princess Bubblegum herself, and implies that Ice King is aware that PB has these traits, meaning he's familiar with Bubblegum's personality on a very deep level, otherwise he wouldn't be able to write this alternate version of her. And the fanfiction within a fanfiction within a fanfiction within a fanfiction was sheer brilliance. Everything else, though? Bleh. Fiona and Cake's pancake quest was inane. Flame Prince wanting to use a bathroom in a library was boring, and Marshall and LSP's segment was just dumb. Those tables were flat and rather unfunny, and they make up the vast majority of the episode. Fiona and Cake is supposed to be a fun, gender-bending detour to the main series, and 5 Short Tables simply wasn't fun enough for me. Summer Showers was just really bland. It wasn't bad. I wasn't dissatisfied with any particular component of it. There were no specific problems. But on the whole, it just wasn't stimulating in the least. It made for quite the humdrum experience. I have to praise the episode for eliciting a heartfelt emotional connection between Viola and her father, but that's the only thing that really stood out for me. Summer Showers felt a bit like a generic Lifetime Channel movie was condensed down into 11 minutes and had its cast replaced with Adventure Time characters. Obviously, it's not using the concept of any specific event or fictional work, but the feeling of that was invoked for me. Usually, I'm not that big of a fan of taking an already existing story and creating a pseudo-parody of sorts by overlaying characters from a different series onto it. Although there are plenty of exceptions where I really enjoyed such a thing. But when shows do have episodes like this, often the borrowed story is made more zany and wacky by adding new ridiculousness to the original premise. That's what makes it fun! Summer Showers felt like the opposite happened. Adventure Time is usually zany, wacky, and ridiculous, and it felt like all these things were stripped from the downtrodden slice-of-life occurrences that were happening in Summer Showers. The experience just wasn't entertaining enough. I feel like I may get some flack for this choice. Bad Jubies is my second least favorite episode of the season. Now, I adored the stop-motion animation. It was incredible and so fun to look at. Purely from the visual perspective, the episode was a fantastic treat. That glorious animation wasn't enough to overcome the episode's content, however. Bad Jubies wasn't just guest animated, it was also written and storyboarded by Kristen Lepore, and I feel like this interpretation of Adventure Time didn't gel well with the actual series. To this day, I still feel like the only episode written and storyboarded by a guest animator that managed to brilliantly capture the essence of Adventure Time was Masaaki Yuasa's Food Chain. Just as a reminder, Beyond the Grotto was mostly guest animated, but otherwise created by the usual staff behind Adventure Time. For me, the content in Bad Jubies felt like it was verging on Nick Jr. material. The episode felt like it was targeted more toward young children rather than to all ages. And the story for Bad Jubies is lifted from the children's book Frederick by Leo Lionni. The synopsis is that a mouse observes the world rather than helping other mice gather resources for the winter, but when food stocks are depleted and the harshness of winter continues to bear down, Frederick boosts the morale and spirits of the other mice with his poetic ruminations. That's also the plot of Bad Jubies, except that Jake makes a sentient storm calm down, which is the primary way in which the episode diverges from Frederick, but also dilutes the more powerful meaning packed in the work the episode is based on. Bad Jubies did not jive with me. Scamps is my least favorite episode of Season 7. It's the only episode of the season I would say I outright disliked. The premise is a common concept when it comes to misbehaving youth. Use what they know and what their lives are based around to formulate a lesson plan that eventually widens their worldview. In the end, they are actually learning and may eventually be capable of seeing the world outside of a scammer's perspective. The premise is not the problem, it's the execution of the premise that's garbo. Finn's interactions with the Marshmallow Kids is only marginally entertaining at best, and his quirky choice of words was the most comical part of the whole thing. None of the Marshmallow Kids are interesting characters, and they're barely individualized enough to separate them out. It might be asking a lot to differentiate and have us bond with 4 new characters in an 11-minute episode, but Adventure Time is capable of establishing dynamic characters with only brief screen time. It's within the show's capacity, but in Scamps, it feels like the 4 characters are just collectively filling an extremely generic role. It's made all the worse by these 4 kids coming off as at least semi-competent for the first half of the episode, and then being delegated to dunces who can't comprehend yanking a vine for the other half of the episode. That absurd move undermines the entire concept of rehabilitating misbehaving youth, because it treats them as if they're completely stupid when, in fact, often they're not. Look, I'm not expecting for an 11-minute cartoon to be the 4th season of The Wire. That's not possible. But I do expect more than the mess we got. My favorite moment of this episode was this 3-second scene, because it implies Princess Bubblegum took up birdwatching to ease back on the extent she spies on her citizens. Scamps sucked. Some viewers may have noticed that I haven't done full-length reviews for any of the episodes on this list. It's almost as if I had skipped over the episodes I didn't enjoy that much. What a weird coincidence that is, right? Seriously though, at least now I get to shed some thoughts on the parts of the season that didn't work for me that well. Let me know which episodes you enjoyed the least and why in the comments. And if you'd like, check out my video on my top 5 favorite episodes of the season. Catch you on the flip.